are going to start the session today with a conversation with Suman Talukdar, founder and managing partner of AiSprouts.VC. Suman, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning, Sarmana. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing okay.
All right, let's get you introduced to our audience. Tell us a little bit about your background as well as about AiSprouts.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, I'm a single GP, founder and managing partner at AiSprouts. We're a $10 million pre-seed fund that's focused on machine learning ventures, specifically those coming out of Silicon Valley. We basically look for great founders that have, amazing ideas with strong product traction. And our mission is basically to back the next generation of breakthrough companies that we think are going to have a huge impact in the world around us. The models basically, we participate in rounds with other venture funds in the area. And we're typically writing checks in the range of like 100 to, about $500,000. So, so my story in terms of, how I got here, I'd say a lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm Latin American by birth. So I was born in Venezuela, but Indian by descent. My parents are actually from eastern part of India, near Assam and Meghalaya. My parents went to school in Calcutta. But then now I'm American by citizenship. So I've been here since I was a teenager. And, my story is basically, my father moved to the U.S., in the late 70s. He was a Fulbright. And then he moved to Venezuela to be a professor. This was, in the late 70s. Venezuela was kind of this utopia in Latin America. It was just getting started. So I grew up there. And, moved to the States when I was a teenager. So I always have had kind of a multicultural exposure. And out of all places, I moved to Houston, Texas. Interesting place to move in the U.S., and it was actually a wonderful place to grow up. I went to high school, college there, did very well in high school, and I like to, mention that because especially in this kind of very politically and racially charged U.S. environment that we live in. I moved as an immigrant to a new community and, was able to thrive, was very welcome there. So, I graduated first in my class out of undergrad and, moved to Rice University, got my computer engineering degree there. And basically, that's around the time, late 90s, you probably remember the internet was just kind of happening. You'd have to, there weren't shows like these around, but you'd pick up all your news in things like Wired magazine. So I was reading a lot of Wired magazine and decided what I wanted to do was move to Silicon Valley and see, what this whole place was all about. So so that's basically what brought me here. So now I've been here, 20 years. And have had, amazing number of experiences and have been fortunate to meet, tons of amazing people. And that's what...
What is your professional background in Silicon Valley? What track did you follow?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So when I got out here, basically I was an engineer, just like a lot of folks. And one of my first bosses out of undergrad was one of the first founders of Siri later on. So I did a bunch of AI stuff there. So I was basically engineer product manager for a while, then left the Valley for a couple of years to get my MBA at Harvard, came back in the basically late 2000, so like 2009, 2010, and basically became the first kind of like business hire for any venture-backed company. So for the last, 10 years, I took on that role. I had 5 back-to-back exits, which was kind of, if you statistically think about it, a little bit crazy, but it kind of worked out for me. And 2 of those companies went public. One was a $400 million sale to Symantec. And all those roles, I literally did everything from, helping founders get their first customers, helping with partnerships, defining the strategy, just anything that a kind of well-rounded executive would do. and basically learned a lot about, what makes companies like really, really successful. Not just, what makes an idea work, but what are the characteristics, what are the traits that helps you create these like breakout companies. Mm-hmm. And when I was in a stage in my life where I was like, hey, I think I have the means and the interest in the network, started to get involved with, my friends' companies, either in some sort of advisory capacity, board roles, and started to make small kind of angel investments. And that's what led me to kind of where I am today. So some of those things ended up working out. People got to know me in my network. And then basically late last year, I had the opportunity to basically, pull some people together and formalize a fund. And so this is pre-COVID. Obviously, all these things are unplanned. But I launched AI Sprouts late last year with some capital. So, the positive from that is that through this environment, I was actually in a position to invest. So that's a little bit of my background.
Great. Very interesting, very multicultural. I love this kind of, multicultural perspective. We are, as you know, we're a global accelerator, so we work with entrepreneurs all around the world. Now, talk a little bit about, when you started off talking about AI Sprouts, you said you want some product validation. So talk to us about what you mean by that. And in that context, you also said that you have developed some thesis around what makes a breakout company. Let's brainstorm a little bit about what that thesis is and how do you see the beginnings of that in an early validation process.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm going to try to get all of that. So, yeah, in terms of kind of the product traction, I mean, I think every investor, every operator has their own lens of what they think is going to work, right? Or for me, I found product traction to be like the key element. So like all the companies that have done well had that as like a characteristic, early in the days, right around the time when the investors come in, thought this thing was really working, right? So to me, that's
our philosophy, by the way.
What's that?
That's our philosophy too.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So love to hear what you think of the topic as well. But yeah, so basically, early revenues is one signal of that. But sometimes revenue follows like great usage. So what I look for is really, products that the customers, it's really simple. Like you call them and they're like, oh my gosh, I love the product. It does what they tell me, it'll do, it solves a big problem. And there's usually some clear metrics around that. And obviously as a second sort of step to that, there's revenues tied to it. So it's pretty simple. To me, that's the sort of the starting point of any discussion. It's
so you are willing to write checks without revenue, but you want to be able to talk to customers and have customers rave about the product and the value they're getting from it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people say, look, revenue is kind of like the sort of the key point where there's product market fit. I mostly agree to that. Sometimes it can hide a lot of things in the product, but like great usage and an understanding of like the exact use case of how the product is kind of fitting the need is like a really good way to know whether this thing is working. Yeah. And it can be like at the cusp of you sort of seeing the kind of the revenue from the first customers, or even like getting to repeatable revenue at a yeah. Relatively short amount of time.
Great. Now talk about sectors. What sectors do you want to apply your AI prowess to, and is it B2B, B2C, both, enterprise, small business? What's your sweet spot?
Yeah, I really think, I've been doing AI looking at it for a long time, and we're kind of like in this big bang period for what I call, practical AI. And it's literally, you're saying you're going after $1 trillion. I mean, just this space is going to have that type of an impact. And just like, people were saying, hey, SaaS SaaS is eating the world. My perspective now is AI is going to gradually be eating SaaS. And so from that perspective, I'm very open to, anything. My background's obviously in B2B. So I have a little bit of a preference or a better understanding of companies that have a B2B enterprise SaaS model. But I'm open to obviously user-based products, maybe even like consumer. I'm pretty agnostic. I think the space is wide open. And so you're going to see a lot of experimentation from entrepreneurs, developing interesting new products. And so if I have this like product traction-based lens, I think the best thing I can do is pretty agnostic and be open to what I'm seeing.
And what about geography? Are you only interested in Silicon Valley companies or broader?
Yeah, no, I mean, basically, the goal of the fund and just in general, my goal as an investor is to basically back and invest in, like, let's say the best 100 AI companies that are going to be sort of coming out or have a strong presence in Silicon Valley. So the first step in that with this first fund is to focus on companies that are here, right? It's a single GP. I can't spread myself too thin. Obviously, I'm leveraging my network here to find these opportunities. And so that's a step. But over time, what I can really see happening is it'll naturally expand to companies where Silicon Valley is, a strong strategic presence for them, right? I mean, companies are starting out everywhere. They're growing everywhere. Exactly. So I don't think, being limited is necessarily the thing you want to do in the long run, especially with something like AI. But what I've learned from living, in the area for so many years is there's this culture here that obviously is spreading, and but there's, it's achieved critical mass here for a very long time. And so I think that companies that sort of have a presence here or have some strong kind of on-the-ground connection really benefit from that. And that leads to, in some ways, really these outsized outcomes that, before were really rare, right? And here seem to be very common. Yeah.
So let's dig down into AI and your thesis around AI a little bit. We do a series, I don't know if you read it, called Thought Leaders in Artificial Intelligence, which is a very popular series, and we've been doing it for a long time. And we bring on entrepreneurs as well as people in large companies to talk about what they are doing, what they're seeing, and so forth. So we have a pretty comprehensive thesis on AI. So here are some of the nuggets of what I have observed, and I want to kind of hear what you have to say on these conclusions that I have arrived at. So if you were trying to do an AI platform company, it helps if you have done this before. If this is your first time out, it is harder to get investors to work with you on a platform company thesis. So in that case, I think more a vertical AI, an application, domain knowledge, a niche, that kind of investment thesis works better. On the other hand, the breakout companies, I am a huge fan of platform as a service, and I see in the next 10 years, 20 years, I think the companies that are going to do successful platform as a service, not just SaaS, but SaaS and PaaS. They may come into market as a SaaS, one application like CRM for Salesforce, but eventually it's the platform that gets a much broader adoption with an independent software vendor network that's built on top of that platform. That model, I think, is going to build the biggest companies. The decacorns are going to come out of that model, is my thesis. But, it's also AI has always this question mark around, does it work? And investors have to somehow figure out, does it work? And in your case, you're saying that you want the product working and in the hands of customers and customers using it and getting value out of it. That is not a short time from inception, right? You have to, and AI engineers are expensive and so forth. So it's that early stage of business building in AI is difficult. If you've done it before, if you have capital of your own, or if you have credibility that you can go and tell an investor that I've done this before, this is what I'm going to do next, people will sign checks. These are my observations. I'd love to hear what your, synthesis of the space is.
Yeah, I generally agree. I think in, as you know, right, I think entrepreneurship, a lot of it has to do with recognizing when there's exceptions that you should pay attention to, though, right? So I think a lot of it depends on, the individual entrepreneurs and their background. But yeah, I mean, I think platforms versus applications, and then I would say there's kind of like a third, there's like enablers. So like platforms, definitely, I think obviously there's a bias towards folks that can compete at scale. They're usually products that aren't necessarily vertically focused. So, you're trying to it takes more money to sell. And because it takes more money to sell, you're basically having to raise more capital in the long run. And so that definitely biases investments towards people that have done it before. And, there's only, every so often there's like really successful platform companies. So I would agree with you. I think that's helpful. I think there is kind of a category, though, of like enablers in AI. So these would be sort of companies that are developing unique products and maybe services that are sitting on top of the platforms that aren't necessarily applications, but they are helping people develop the applications faster. So an example of that is a company called Labelbox. They've been really good at raising money. It's a young entrepreneur, and Manu Sharma, he was the founder, and first company out of Stanford, and he basically focused on tagging, and then like what people do after they tag, and then how you process that data. And I made an investment in that space as well. But those companies are literally making the process of using things like Amazon and Google and developing apps on top of NVIDIA like easier, right? And so I think that's an example of one where you don't necessarily have to have like this crazy big ambition or capital requirement like you do if you were trying to do, edge platform. But then the third, I would definitely say it's the vertical applications. Those are, I think, where, it's like the bread and butter today of, if you want to call it practical or narrow AI. Made a couple of investments in that space. Literally, people can take advantage of the fact that there's tons of data. It's readily available. People can aggregate it and store it. Not only in a much cheaper way, but in a way that we're using tools that were not available before, so much more easily. So it doesn't necessarily take a lot of developer time. And then with compute, NVIDIA GPU compute improving like 30,000 times over the last 5 years, it actually, the amount to train some basic data sets using standard algorithms has come down quite a bit. So what used to take you 3 days can now take you, 60 seconds. And so that allows entrepreneurs, teams of 2, 3, 4 people, never ever buying a server, doing everything on Amazon, to build these really focused applications on specific domains, whether it's, finance, HR.
The unfair advantage is the domain knowledge, really.
Yeah, 100%. So they can tie the domain knowledge with the data, with the use case, with, answering the question that people want to get answered. And with the application stuff I'm seeing, it's all about kind of like optimizing for a very specific use case. And that's where I think there's a ton of opportunity, right? There's so many use cases.
That is going to be the big, from our point of view, we want millions of entrepreneurs to be successful. And I think in that verticalized domain-specific AI, we will see very large numbers of entrepreneurs because people have niche expertise in different areas, and applying AI to those areas with that domain knowledge is very, very interesting. And I think where I think the trick is going to be is this really good platform companies to enable that kind of entrepreneurship in a big way. So I think PaaS is going to be the determining infrastructure that we will need at scale to enable this kind of entrepreneurship broadly.
100%, yep.
So, Suman, slightly different question. You have a relatively small fund, at least now. Maybe later you're going to do something different, but for the moment you have a small fund. What is your thought about chasing unicorns versus chasing the, 2x, 3x, 5x?
Yeah, I'm relatively new to this, but I've kind of been on the investing side. But on the other side, I've had obviously experience working with venture-backed companies.
Yeah.
And, sort of common knowledge or kind of like best practices, it seems like all the work, effort, sweat pays off when things work, right? And when they work, they tend to work like amazingly well. And the numbers are like crazy, right? So, less than 4% of all venture capital deals like basically give you more than 10x, right? But when those things happen, the returns more than make up for all the investment that's happened in the industry, right? So I think, to be effective in this area, you have to have the lens of you are looking for those companies that are going to have the outsized outcome, even if the probability of getting that is pretty low, right? But that said, I think if your fund strategy is amicable to, being open to having exits that are less ambitious, I think the better it is for the entrepreneur. I think what I've seen, a lot of times funds really push companies to go beyond where they necessarily have to because of certain, drivers as it relates to fund size, what they want to do with their capital. And some of the outcomes for the entrepreneurs aren't necessarily aligned with what they thought was best for the business. A larger fund may actually prefer that a company goes to zero rather than have a small exit just because they really want to push that, multi-billion-dollar outcome. So for me, I am basically trying to get into the next unicorns. I mean, that's what would, one, basically more than enough pace for the fund. But I am sort of, $100 million exit for my fund still will be acceptable for me. Right? I'll be able to make a good return. So I'm open to that, and I think that positions me in a unique way with founders because I can be super founder friendly. I can be like almost like a co-founder capital for them. And with the industry, I think it also puts me in a friendly position because, I'm only playing in the early rounds. So if my ability to attract capital from, the brands like Sequoia, et cetera, in the later stages is only going to increase the likelihood of success for me, that it's going to be a big exit. So yeah, I mean, that's the strategy I've taken. I think other people can. There are certainly other models, and I've seen them, but I'm sort of biased towards, yeah.
If I synthesize what we are seeing, we have every week we have an investor talking about their investment thesis here, and this has been going on for a long time. So we have hundreds of investors and their investment thesis that have come together on this platform. And if I synthesize what I see, there is one category of investors who are clearly chasing unicorns, and they don't want to hear anything else. They just want to chase unicorns, and they're fine with being feeders into the Sequoias and the larger venture capital funds, and they will play the all or nothing game. And then this is a relatively later development, just because there are 1,000+ micro VCs out there. You're a micro VC, right? There are 1,000+ micro VCs out there right now. A lot of entrepreneurs have made good money in the technology business, technology industry, and many of them have started micro VCs. They have good expertise, good hands-on expertise. So this is smart money. From an entrepreneur's point of view, this is very attractive capital. And there is a recognition of the fact that most exits, strategic exits, actually happen in the sub-50 million range, and definitely in the sub-100 million range. And to play in that exit potential, you have to keep your capital spend efficient. So if you do capital efficient businesses and get to enough validation and enough credibility, and there is even a $200, $300 million TAM, you could find these strategic exits, and that's actually a very nice opportunity for small funds. That's one conclusion that I'm seeing driving a lot of funds' investment thesis. And the second one is some of these smaller funds are also exiting in Series A or Series B when the larger amounts of money start coming in, because it may have already taken you 5 years in a capital efficient mode to get to the inflection point. And then when the inflection point comes, large money starts to come in. That may even make sense for you to exit, even at a 5x valuation or something like that. So this is kind of the synthesis of the space. So for the entrepreneurs who are listening, the thing that you have to determine, and I've been harping on this constantly these days because we see the problem everywhere, you cannot fit a square peg in a round hole. You have, just like you're looking for product market fit, you're going to have to find investor entrepreneur fit. An investor who is looking for one type of exit, one type of investment opportunity is not going to invest in the other style. So, you're just going to basically bang against the wall if you go after investors who are not interested in your style of investment opportunity. Keep that in mind. I recommend that you guys who are entrepreneurs who are starting to look for funding or starting to think about funding, spend lots of time in our financing module of the curriculum if you're a premium member or a basic member, or go to the blog and just go spend time in the seed capital series and get in the heads of investors. You need to understand whom you should go after. If you can spend enough time in our body of work around investors and give me a short list of, okay, Stromana, here are the 15 investors that we think are going to be a good fit for you, and I will help you in that process. It takes me 5 minutes to introduce you to 15 investors, if it's the right investors. But I'm not going to blow my credibility by introducing you to 15 investors who are not relevant for you. So that's kind of like the reason I'm harping so much on investor entrepreneur fit these days, is because I see lots of entrepreneurs wasting lots of runway by doing it the wrong way. This is a complex game. You really need to understand how it works before you play it. All right? Suman, before we conclude your segment, a quick case study, one company that you've invested in, that you're bullish about. Take us through the process of how they came to you, when they came to you, what did they have, what did you see in them that made you write the check?
Got it. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll give you 2 rapid fire. So first one is a company called Hayden AI. I can't disclose the exact amount yet because it hasn't been published, but basically I met them through, the circuits here in Silicon Valley, incubators, accelerators, got to know the entrepreneur. And as I was getting to know them, one of the investors I knew at another fund, a fund called Autotech, they said that, hey, we like this company. And so, basically soft circled some interest with a number of investors. So that was kind of like the trigger for me, some sort of like a social peer validation, in addition to like an insight, a good meeting with the founder. And then as I got deeper into the technology, something that's very unique, it's AI for public safety. There's not a lot of companies doing that. Products like 10x cheaper than anything else. And they potentially produce $1 billion of revenue to cities from installations in the hundreds. So there's a scale in the upside that was really unique. And that was the trigger, basically, that, they had pilots. Within a few months, they could get to a lot of revenue, making them really capital efficient, and became interesting. The second company is a company called Boost Up AI. They raised approximately 4.5 from Canaan and a few other investors. Founders were out of IIT, had about a couple $100,000 in revenue when I met them, had raised very little money, and we're doing really well with a product that made kind of sales smarter, right? So by telling people what opportunities are going to close. And same thing, it was a bit of, soft circling interest from other investors, having a good perspective on the space. It's a big market. Forecasting is being used by everyone. And the traction by customers is very impressive. They're able to do something with the 10th less capital than companies that were founded, 8 years ago trying to do the same thing. And so that was kind of the story behind that. So everything had great teams, strong traction, and it's kind of like a big market, big vision that they were going after.
All right. Terrific. Well, wonderful conversation, Suman. I hear that you're going to stay for the pitches, yes?
Yeah, for sure. That's okay. I was just going to listen in.